the microwave glows an unnerving neon green in the pitch-black kitchen. It reads 3:14 in the morning. Outside the frosted window, the street is entirely silent. The world is asleep. But inside this house, the air is thick with a quiet, humming tension. In the living room, a low-light monitor flickers, casting long, wavering shadows against the floral wallpaper. A woman named Alena sits on the edge of the sofa, a cold cup of coffee resting on her knee. She is not watching television. She is listening. She is listening for the sound of breathing, for the rustle of sheets, for the sudden, sharp intake of air that signals a panic, a fall, or a medical crisis from the bedroom down the hall. This is not a hospital. There are no nurses charting vitals at a brightly lit station. There is no shift change coming at 6 a.m. There is only Alena, her aging mother, and the heavy, suffocating blanket of 24/7 care. To understand the psychological landscape of the informal family caregiver, you have to first understand this specific quality of silence. It is a silence that demands absolute vigilance. In 2023 alone, 11.5 million caregivers for people living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias provided an estimated 18.4 billion hours of unpaid help in the United States. 18.4 billion hours. But those numbers, as staggering as they are, do not tell the story of the 3:14 a.m. silence. They do not capture what it means to sleep, as caregivers describe it, with one eye open. We think of caregiving as an act of profound love, and it is. But when it occurs without clinical supervision, without institutional support systems, and without boundaries, it transforms into a psychological pressure cooker. The human nervous system is simply not designed to remain in a state of perpetual hyperarousal. When you are the sole person responsible for keeping another human being alive, safe, and comfortable, your brain perceives threats everywhere. This sudden shift in a loved one's breathing pattern triggers a spike of cortisol. The sound of a footstep in the hallway sends adrenaline coursing through your veins. You are effectively living in a perpetual fight or flight state, but you are not allowed to fight, and you cannot flee. You must simply sit there on the edge of the sofa, waiting. Let us examine the mechanics of this exhaustion. Sleep deprivation is not just a symptom of the caregiving role. It is the foundation upon which the entire psychological toll is built. Research reveals that the physical health impacts on parent carers and elder care providers are profound. Chronic sleep deprivation fundamentally alters cognitive function, emotional regulation, and immune response. Imagine trying to solve a complex puzzle while someone occasionally rings a loud bell right next to your ear, unpredictably for months on end. Now imagine that the puzzle is the medication schedule of a complex neurodegenerative disease, and the bell is the sound of your loved one trying to wander out the front door in the middle of a freezing night. Many caregivers report getting no more than 3 hours of uninterrupted sleep. They are managing oxygen levels, monitoring seizure activity, interpreting the pain signals of someone who may be entirely nonverbal, and making complex medical decisions regarding comorbid conditions, all while operating on a sleep deficit that would incapacitate most people. The exhaustion becomes cellular. It is a bone-deep weariness that a single nap cannot cure. It is a fatigue that weaves itself into the very fabric of your identity. And yet, when the sun comes up, the demands do not lessen. The night shift seamlessly transitions into the day shift. Now we must look at the collision between this intensely private, grueling reality and the cold, unyielding machinery of the outside world. The legacy of our current social care policies is vividly depicted not in grand political speeches, but in the frustrating, isolating, and often humiliating encounters caregivers have with bureaucratic systems. Picture a kitchen table covered in paperwork, stacks of medical bills, insurance claims, and multi-page assessment forms for disability allowances. The caregiver sits at this table, rubbing her eyes, trying to translate the visceral, messy reality of 24/7 care into neat little checkboxes. The application process for support services requires extensive documentation of care needs. But how do you quantify the emotional labor of talking your father down from a dementia-induced hallucination at 2 in the afternoon? How do you check a box that accurately conveys the physical strain of lifting a fully grown adult from a bed to a wheelchair day after day until your own lower back is in perpetual agony? Caregivers often find that social care assessments focus entirely on physical tasks, bathing, dressing, feeding, while completely ignoring the invisible psychological labor of constant vigilance. The system demands proof of exhaustion, yet the forms themselves are exhausting to complete. Families report facing multiple rejections before successfully accessing their entitlements. They're forced into a labyrinthine appeals process that consumes the precious little time and emotional energy they have left. And this is where the controversy and conflict truly emerges. Society publicly praises informal caregivers. They are called heroes, angels, the backbone of the healthcare system. Indeed, they provide massive financial relief to the state. But when these heroes ask for tangible help, when they need respite care or financial support, or simply someone to take the night shift so they can sleep for 8 uninterrupted hours, the system suddenly becomes rigid, suspicious, and incredibly difficult to navigate. The conflict is between a society that relies on unpaid labor to keep its healthcare infrastructure from collapsing and a systemic refusal to provide those laborers with the clinical and financial safety nets they desperately need. This institutional neglect accelerates a deeply insidious form of social isolation. Let us look at how the caregiver's world begins to shrink. It does not happen all at once. It happens in slow, agonizing increments. First, the spontaneous social activities disappear. You cannot simply meet a friend for lunch when you are tied to a rigid medication schedule or when leaving the house requires arranging specialized, expensive, and often unreliable backup care. Then the invitations start to dry up. Friends who cannot relate to this new normal drift away. They don't know what to say. They feel awkward hearing about feeding tubes or behavioral outbursts. So they stop calling. The caregiver is left stranded on an island of their own making, surrounded by the ocean of their loved one's needs. The data reflects this harsh reality. About 1/3 of caregivers report feeling lonely some days, most days, or every day. Studies show that caregivers often experience significant psychological stress, with a large percentage reporting depression and anxiety, and many resorting to psychotropic medications just to cope. They are mourning the loss of their own life trajectory while simultaneously grieving the incremental loss of the person they are caring for, a phenomenon known as anticipatory grief. You are watching someone fade away, day by day, and you are doing it entirely alone. Consider the geographic disparities in this isolation. Imagine being a caregiver in a rural community. The nearest hospital is 40 miles away. The concept of local respite care is practically non-existent. There is no one to call when the burden becomes too heavy. The isolation is not just emotional. It is physical, geographical, and absolute. In these environments, the lack of information and technical support amplifies the stress. A lack of proper training on how to manage patient symptoms means the caregiver is constantly second-guessing themselves, terrified that a wrong decision will lead to suffering or death. This pressure cooker environment inevitably takes a biological toll. Caregiver burnout is not merely a psychological state, it is a profound physical deterioration. The warning signs are stark: persistent exhaustion not relieved by sleep, increasing irritability, emotional numbness, and the development of negative feelings toward the care recipient. Physical symptoms manifest as weight changes, frequent illness due to a compromised immune system, and the worsening of chronic conditions. Caregivers frequently neglect their own health, prioritizing their loved ones' medical appointments over their own. They skip screenings, ignore their own pain, and delay seeking treatment for their own depression. The ultimate devastating climax of this trajectory is hidden in the mortality statistics. Research consistently shows that caregiver stress can increase mortality risk by up to 63% compared to non-caregivers. The sheer weight of the responsibility is literally breaking hearts and shortening lives. The caregiver, in their desperate attempt to save their loved one, is sacrificing their own survival. And yet, despite the crushing weight of this reality, the care continues. Why? Because beneath the exhaustion, beneath the resentment and the bureaucratic nightmares, there is a profound, enduring bond. Caregivers often describe their role as a moral responsibility, driven by deep affection and reciprocity. In many cultures, there is a strong familialist norm, a belief that caring for one's parents or a disabled child at home is an absolute duty. They find moments of profound meaning, a deepened connection with the person they are caring for. But this love does not negate the suffering. It complicates it. It creates a psychological paradox where the source of your deepest fulfillment is also the source of your greatest pain. As the morning light finally breaks through the frosted kitchen window, the neon clock shifts to 6 a.m. The monitor crackles to life with the sound of movement. Alena stands up from the sofa. Her back aches, her eyes burn, and her heart races with the familiar, anxious rhythm of the new day. She walks down the hallway to begin it all again. She will administer the medications. She will fight with the insurance company on the phone. She will sit in the quiet, isolated house, and she will do it because the system demands it and because her love demands it. But the invisible toll she pays, the quiet, relentless erosion of her own physical and psychological landscape, remains largely unseen by the world rushing by outside her window. The story of the 24/7 caregiver is the story of an invisible infrastructure built on the fragile, breaking backs of millions of people who are running out of time, running out of support, and running out of breath. If you found this perspective meaningful, I encourage you to send this episode to a friend who might appreciate a deeper understanding of what it truly means to carry this kind of invisible weight.
This is CARECAST. Exploring the heart of care.